calls continue to grow for Mayor Adams to step down. Pressure mounting on Governor Hochul to remove him from office, something that's never happened in New York State's 235-year history. So if the governor does decide to remove the mayor, how exactly would this work? Joining us now, James Sample, professor at Hofstra Law. James, good to see you this morning.
Likewise. Good to see you, Chris.
So Governor Hochul has the power to remove Mayor Adams, unprecedented, as I just mentioned. Is this absolute, or is there a process that she has to go through should she choose to finally pull the trigger and remove him?
It is, in some senses, absolute, but there is a very, very modest process, and that process is incredibly ill and undefined, which is to say that the state constitution of New York and the city charter of New York City combined indicate that the governor has the power to remove the mayor, and all that the state constitution says, this is the sum total of the standard and the specifications for the process, is that the mayor, quote, may be removed by the governor after giving to such officer, that would be the mayor, a copy of the charges against him and an opportunity to be heard in his defense. But there is nothing else in the way of procedure. And as you mentioned at the top, it hasn't been tested in 235 years, so there's no precedent to draw on in terms of the process either.
So, James, let me ask you this. If you were a betting man, do you think she would do it?
I think that the stakes for her, this is a risk-reward analysis that she's engaged in, and I think that the risk-reward analysis is political much more than it's legal. I suspect that she is thinking of her own political future as much as she's thinking of the well-being of New Yorkers. She'll certainly speak as though she's thinking about New York City and the well-being of New York City and whether or not Mayor Adams can really do the job. But she's also got to think about constituencies in New York City and constituencies who are likely or unlikely to support her based on what she does. And you saw yesterday, as you mentioned earlier, that she met with a number of leaders, and some of the leaders from those constituencies, particularly black voters who have been among Mayor Adams' strongest supporters. The other thing that she needs to consider is, if she were to remove Mayor Adams, does that increase the opportunity for former Governor Andrew Cuomo? She and Cuomo are not exactly close to take over the role. That's a risk that she's considering. If I were a betting man, to answer your question, I think that the lower risk route is to just sort of offer platitudes, say, you know, I spoke with the mayor, I gave him the equivalent of a sternly worded letter and told him to act his age, you know, kind of like parenting style, and not to remove him. So
a slap on the wrist, because the one thing you haven't even mentioned is the response from the federal level if she were to remove him. Dealing with that, I just couldn't imagine the reaction that you'd get, considering what's been going on right now with the relationships that have been forged. Let me ask you this: where is this going to leave other members of the mayor's administration right now, on both sides, whether she should choose to remove him or he stays? We've had so many deputy mayors in the last 48 hours that have resigned, and then you've got past members that were close with the mayor that are under indictment or what. I mean, how does this all shake out as far as people that are close to the mayor?
That's a great question, and your point about the federal consequences are very, very real, because at this point it's pretty clear. I mean, the signal has been sent in crystal clear terms that if she were to remove Mayor Adams, she would be incurring the wrath of the President of the United States and the Department of Justice. Even though it's her legal right to do so, there would be some political repercussions. For the deputy mayors, for the city administrators who are operating the day-to-day, it's chaos. It's been chaos since October. We spoke in October, and there were numerous sort of resignations and or pending indictments at that point, and we thought, wow, can he really manage to right the ship and steady the ship? Now you've seen that just 4 more deputy mayors resigning in the last couple of days. The question really becomes, is the chaos, much more than the charges themselves, causing a hindrance to the governance of the city?
And that, I think some people would say yes, emphatically. Finally, before I do let you go, 2 p.m. today, okay, this is what we've been talking about all morning in the last couple of days. The judge in the Adams federal case has ordered a conference with both parties, attorneys for the Department of Justice and Adams. What do you think comes out of this?
Judge Dale Ho has that conference scheduled at 2 p.m. today, as you say. He is a very, very sharp federal judge, a fairly junior federal judge, but he is likely to put a significant test to the prosecutors and say, look, what is the real justification for dropping this? I want to hear some answers. I want to hear some clear answers about whether or not this is legally justified. Now, to be clear, prosecutors have a great deal of discretion as to whether or not whether they decide to bring charges, whether or not they decide to invest, whether or not they decide to investigate, whether they decide to prosecute. But once they've done so, once they've got an indictment, the judge has a modicum, it's a small modicum, but a modicum of authority to prevent them from dismissing a case. It is very, very rare that that actually happens. I suspect he will ultimately go along with the dismissal. He would conceivably have the option of appointing a special prosecutor. That would be chaos that even us New Yorkers, and we're measuring by different standards over the last couple of years, are not used to. That would be quite something.
Is this one of those things, though, you've got, obviously, the DOJ wants the charges dropped. It would be also unprecedented for Judge Ho to say, you know what, I'm going to go against what the Department of Justice wants. But is this more about getting these attorneys, getting them on record with their law licenses hanging in the balance to say some of the things that, A, they may want to say, but probably shouldn't say if they want to keep practicing law?
That is absolutely correct. And as you mentioned at the top, Mayor Adams is required to be there as well. So there's probably, at a minimum, both the pressure on the lawyers to tell the truth, but tell the truth, and hopefully the truth isn't a truth that gets you disbarred, and some pressure on Mayor Adams to have to sit there and listen to a little bit of a stern talking to from a federal judge as well.
Accountability is such a good thing. The lost art. All right, Professor James, thank you. Always great to hear from you. All right, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Chris.
And we, of course, have a team of reporters who'll be covering all of the big developments today. You can look for our updates on CBS News New York and at cbsnewyork.com.